Hello, my name is Taylor Cadlack, and this is why I believe we should raise the minimum wage for the service industry. So, before you get too excited or annoyed, this is not another rant about the raise to $15 minimum wage like argument or any of that nonsense. This is really just about how the wages for the service industry are so low, far lower than the regular minimum wage, that there's a problem. And it's because of gratuity. It's because companies are way too comfortable paying their servers and workers less because of that. Well, what is gratuity? Gratuity is tipping. It's defined in Wikipedia and Webster as a voluntary sum of money or gift given after services provided. It's usually on top of what the price that was already paid. You see this commonly at restaurants, bars, hotels, restaurants. Um, so where did this start? It was believed to have started in Tudor England in coffee houses and other commercial establishments. Um, and in America, it wasn't actually around until after the Civil War, and then it didn't really become prevalent until the Prohibition era, where companies were making less money, so they encouraged patrons to tip so that they could make profit. Who am I to say that we shouldn't tip? Well, I've actually been in the service industry for little over 5 years, and I've been a bartender for 4 years. So I know full well the struggles of the service industry, and I can see people come in from all over the world and see how their cultures have affected their idea of tipping. You would think that everybody is on board with tipping. They're not. In fact, a majority of the planet doesn't tip. Mostly Canada, North America, that is really it. Europe, Asia, most of those places don't tip, and if they do, it's like a small 10% gratuity tip tacked on to the end. Um, which brings me to my next point, automatic gratuity. It's not the same as tipping. It's, in fact, if you think about it, no different than any other company and how they pay their employees. It's a percentage determined by the company, tacked onto the end of the bill, and then you just see the percentage that the server is going to get. But that's no different than somebody making profit and then paying their employees. And you would think tipping is based on good quality service. And as a professional, I can say that I've been given a good tip because of good service, but I've also have experiences where I thought I gave great service and connected with the guest, still didn't get the greatest of tips. Well, there's a reason for that. This is the title of a 6-page thesis done in the year 2000 at Cornell University, and it highlights multiple different studies that were done that show that tipping and good service has a very weak relationship. Most people don't tip because of the service provided. It's just it's something that is there. It's arbitrary. Before we get too far, I would like to emphasize if you work in the service industry, give good service. Don't just expect a good or bad tip one way or another. And if you're a customer at that place and it's customary to tip, please do so. These workers are working for well below minimum wage for these tips. That's not what this argument is about. The argument is about raising minimum wage for service industry workers. So let's get right into it. I feel like I've answered most of the initial questions that you might have. Um, Hopefully, by the end of this, you'll agree with me on why we should abolish tipping and raise minimum wage. That's the real problem here. So, to start off, the federal rate for servers in the US is $2.13 an hour, and in 19 states, that's what servers make. In fact, servers are 3 times as likely to experience poverty in the US than other workers are, according to a report done in March 2014. Some states have leeway to raise minimum wage for workers. Most of them don't take it. The tipped minimum wage was established in 1966, and it was to be 50% of the regular minimum wage. 1996 came around under the Clinton administration. They decoupled that, so that's no longer the case, and it's been 213 an hour since then. And it's generally accepted that when you go out, you're supposed to leave a 20% tip for good service. Most people don't tip that much, according to a survey done in early 2017 by a coupon site. 2,600 adults were surveyed. Only 23% they say they leave that 20% tip at the end of service, and the rest of them leave less because of their current financial situation. Um, so if restaurants have to pay servers a higher hourly wage, they'll be forced to increase menu prices. Generally, that's the argument against abolishing tipping. However, if you think about it, you're already going to pay the same amount. You're paying the amount and you see that percentage that goes to the server. It's not going to change if we take away tipping. In fact, some places, in 2014, it was reported that some places require restaurant owners to pay their servers higher hourly minimum wage, and that actually increased productivity. They stayed at their jobs longer, and they spent more money at their own restaurant, which in turn increased restaurant sales. Um, so the next two topics I'm not going to delve too much into because I can't really attest to certain instances, but unfortunately, discrimination in the workplace exists, or in the service industry exists. Some people don't like their server and thus they tip them less, regardless of the quality of service. Same thing for sexual harassment for females mostly. If you're working for tips and you're getting harassed, your options are to give up that table, and then you don't make any money, or just suffer and try to get a tip. It's really not great. It's an unfortunate fact in the service industry, but it's something that we could get around if tipping wasn't really required. Um, so the reasons we tip are often irrational. Research has found that we tend to tip waiters more just by the way they act at the table, not necessarily the service they provided. And a lot of people, when they leave a small tip because of a bad experience, they don't tell anybody why. They just leave less money, and all that's doing is taking money out of the waiter's pocket. Um, at high-end restaurants, there's an issue where tipping, because of the high menu price, you get a higher tip, but it means the people that worked in the back, the chefs, the dishwashers, they make still that same amount. So in some higher end places, they're not allowed to tip. There's just a certain service charge tacked onto the end of the bill. That's pretty much it. There's bills in Washington being looked at for abolishing service tipping, but really word of mouth is the best way to spread the way to get rid of tips. So keep tipping if you go out and tipping is required.